I'm here at the scene of the crime spree, right behind me.
Hey, stranger.
Vice Mayor Strange, you'll address her properly.
You can kiss my foot.
Mr. Rickard, you're out of order.
FBI, we are asking you to investigate this council. Please look into this council, how they award contracts, the bid process, how they use their positions to benefit their friends and themselves, how they use their positions to attack residents and critics and neighbors and business competition. FBI, will you please look into this?
And I welcome the FBI here. If you notice, Mr. Thompson, with his plea for the FBI and his watchdog group, this city runs the cleanest in this whole county. I guarantee
He
that.
was served a federal subpoena this
We
morning.
did receive a subpoena this morning, and we're going to cooperate 100% with the subpoena. And
Most of you who were involved up here, you gaslighted me. You tried to say I was crazy. And now we know that that's not true. And there's a lot of other issues I've been asking about as well.
So 2.5 years, more than that, really. Well, nearly 3 years after the FBI and the Sheriff's Public Trust Unit promised to clean up corruption because there were tens of millions of dollars evidently stolen in FEMA money after Hurricane Michael. Do you know that not a single elected official was ever indicted? No, I can't say that because Mayor Margo Anderson was indicted for some of that. But she wasn't accused of stealing FEMA money, of routing it to her friends and getting kickbacks. As you know, she was indicted for basically using ECS, which was getting paid FEMA money, to clean up her home, but they knew that wasn't true. They dropped it. In the evidentiary hearing, the judge said it's not her property. After the big press conferences. So tonight I'm going to tell you about a ruling that just came out that decides what evidence can be shown to the jury against James Finch. And I want to explain to you, after more than 3 years of investigating, what they've come up with, what the feds have come up with, along with the Sheriff's Public Trust Unit. It's one $5,000 check that James Finch wrote. That's it. For elected officials. Actually, for elected officials, it's zero, nothing. For FEMA money, and even with James Finch, do you know that this charge against James Finch for writing a $5,000 check, now it totaled $45,000 that he says, and former Commissioner Antonius Barnes says was a business loan, and it appears actually that it was. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But that was for something that Lynn Haven did in like 2016. I think the check was written in 2017. A check. Raise your hand if you think James Finch is going to bribe somebody with a check. Raise your hand if you think anybody in this town bribes people with checks. Now, we know there were sacks of cash. The Lynn Haven police chief had a sack of cash at his feet. He talked about that he was given by Michael White. He says, I was just holding it for him. He had a meeting. Yep. Not a single elected official. Now, I want to remind you about how high profile this was. And I want to remind you about the promises at the press conference in August, on August 19, 2020, when the FBI indicted former Lynn Haven Mayor Margo Anderson and City Attorney Adam Albritton. This is what Sheriff Ford had to say about it. This was just the beginning. It was an ongoing investigation, and all of the public officials who had robbed the county blind, they were going to come get you. They had a new public trust unit, and they would not sleep, wouldn't rest until you were all caught. Remember that?
Well, good afternoon, and Mr. Keefe, Mr. Kuntz, and Zach Rojas, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the citizens of Bay County for your efforts to root out corruption here. It's a sad day, but very necessary that we continue this work. So I just want to thank you both for your partnership. Several months ago, we stood before you and made a pledge to the people of Bay County that we would continue this partnership with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, that together we would root out corruption and hold those responsible for taking advantage of us, the citizens of Bay County, during our most vulnerable time, the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. This fruitful partnership has produced results with the arrest of 9 individuals to date, with the addition today of 2 additional arrests. I believe our intent to aggressively locate and charge those that engage in corruption in Bay County is very clear. I remain proud of the dedication and professionalism of the senior criminal investigators and crime analysts that we've assigned to work with our team from the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. My support of this team will continue until our goals have been accomplished. I continue to be impressed at the expertise of the team assembled by U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe and Special Agent in Charge Rojas, and appreciate their partnership. This investigation remains very active and will continue.
Very active. I've been writing some of this stuff down. So it was actually a pledge that Sheriff Tommy Ford made to the people to work with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office to root out corruption during our most vulnerable time after Hurricane Michael. Remember, the charge against James Finch that remains is that James Finch wrote a single $5,000 check. That's the charge. Now, I know that there's $45,000 involved in the loan that Antonius Barnes did not pay back. And there's a lot to that story, which, even if true, sounds a whole hell of a lot like a state ethics charge to me. It was a fruitful partnership that Sheriff Tommy Ford has with the FBI, although not a single elected official has gone down for the delay in hurricane cleanup and the overcharging of FEMA. Here's a big question, maybe in this fruitful partnership. And the people who were indicted and who pled guilty, a lot of them are low-level folks. The biggest one is City Manager Michael White, who pled guilty and was running around with bags of cash. Also, there's the city attorney, who was getting big, giant kickbacks in a contract that he wrote, FEMA money, but not an elected official. Even though an FBI agent after that, a year after that, told a judge that Bay County was more corrupt than New Orleans and New Jersey, and named names. Even though I know for sure that the FBI has been investigating elected officials in town. It's not very fruitful. It's not very fruitful when all of those resources end up with just a $5,000 check, not written to James Finch, but written from James Finch as a business loan. That's it. You say, but Bernie, Mayor Anderson pled guilty. They dropped all 64 charges because they knew that they weren't true. And if you don't believe that, you haven't looked at the evidence. You haven't been to the evidentiary hearing. You haven't seen the evidence. You haven't read the FBI memos. And I get that. I don't expect you to do all that stuff. But really, if you're going to have an opinion, you ought to at least be informed. Is that fair? I want to remind you before I show you about the ruling today, what U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe promised us in this fruitful partnership to root out public corruption that we all hung our hats on. And I've been told by Sheriff Ford that these things take time, and that the COVID really slowed us down, and there was that election, and you got to have faith. So it's the George Michael approach to rooting out public corruption. Meanwhile, the clock ticks. One more year and statute of limitations begin. Now, there are nuances to that, because it doesn't kick in until 2 years after you're out of public office, which might be a reason that you see a lot of early retirements for government officials. But anyway, let's take a look at some of the promises from U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe at the time. The U.S. Attorney's Office promised that we'll come for you.
I want to share some perspectives about the ongoing work of our public trust unit. Every successful public corruption prosecution sends a powerful message to corrupt government officials and to officials who are being tempted by opportunities for corruption. And that message is, we will come for you. But as importantly, these corruption prosecutions also send a message to every hardworking and law-abiding citizen that the integrity of those that actually run our government is essential to the continuation of our democracy. And your federal law enforcement agencies, with the partnership of local law enforcers like Sheriff Ford, are out there serving you, bringing to justice those who corrupt our government and who violate the public's trust.
No, you didn't. You didn't go after those who violated the public trust. You know who they are. You've got the evidence. You've got real evidence against them. Y'all know that. I know you know that. I know you know that. But instead, you've been laser focused on the Lynn Haven mayor, Margo Anderson, and developer James Finch. Then you dropped all 64 charges against her and said, if you just tell the FBI that you met Mickey White in October rather than December, you don't even need to cooperate. When's the last time you've heard of a plea deal where the defendant didn't even need to cooperate with the prosecutors? Just let's not go to trial. Because the last thing we want to do is go on the witness stand and tell the judge why we went after you. And that's why, by the way, and take this to the bank, I will bet you that there will never be a trial. It's scheduled for March 13. Furthermore, if I'm a betting man, this is my bet. I don't want to go to trial. Sheriff Ford doesn't want to go to trial. His public trust unit doesn't want to go to trial. The FBI doesn't want to go to trial. So, thinking about it over the last week or so, I wouldn't doubt that the feds will make the same move, right? They'll drop the final remaining 2 charges on James Finch, and they'll come up with some lie that you told the FBI, and then they'll pressure the 3 people who pled guilty that are awaiting sentencing and say, you better be good witnesses if you want a lower sentence. That's the old fallback move. It's the old fallback move. Because there was a lot of public corruption. In fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office told Judge Walker that on December 13th. There's a lot of corruption there, Your Honor. They mentioned the school district. They mentioned the county. They've subpoenaed Panama City Beach. We watched on video crimes take place, big crimes, trades during votes. And I'm talking about votes that made the difference. Mike Thomas was the deciding vote. And before he was ready to vote. And before he voted, during the vote, he asked Derwin White, you going to build the road that he wanted by his restaurant? Yeah, I'll build the road. All right, then I vote yes. And he was the deciding vote. The question is why? And the answer is scary and dark. Larry Keefe said, U.S. Attorney Keefe and Sheriff Ford, they said it was a fruitful partnership and it was a pledge to clean up public corruption. And as I said, not a single elected official after Hurricane Michael, with all the FEMA money, and there were hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe $500 million in FEMA money. Let's just take the $5 million that Derwin White's nephew, Mickey White, and Michael White and them pled guilty to. Remember, that wasn't Mayor Anderson didn't plead guilty to any of that. She had to plead guilty that she actually met Mickey White in October, not December of 2018. That's what it was. All right. So with regard to the big stuff, nobody, not a single person. Here's another promise made by at the big press conference.
As I've said before, that very small group that serves for their own illegal benefit and profit, and those who illegally seek to influence them, will be the continued targets of our work. The greatest cost of public corruption is the potential widespread loss of the public's trust in their own government. Corruption is a dangerous virus that threatens to infect public service and the public's trust in it. We are committed to stopping the spread of this virus of corruption in this community. Every citizen has a meaningful role to play in this fight against corruption. If you see or if you know something, say something. Please call or email our office's hotline to report public corruption so everyone can play their part.
The people who did that, a lot of people did that. Many of you watching were interviewed by the FBI. So many of you know about the real public corruption that took place. You know that they have the evidence, Sheriff Ford's public trust unit and all of that. But unless it's my opinion, now it's opinion, that unless the outside feds come in and clean up public corruption, we're not going to really get it. How are we going to get it locally? It's mutual assured destruction, right? We know that people within the sheriff's office are tied with people outside the sheriff's office. Some of them are even their campaign managers. How the hell is that going to happen? But trial is set for March 13th to get developer James Finch on a $5,000 check that he wrote for a project before Hurricane Michael. And I don't know. I mean, there's not enough outrage. So do you want to see the ruling, a little bit about the ruling and how WMBB is covering the newest ruling about what the jury will see if we ever really even get there? I'll show it to you right after this. It's a hot time in Florida, and my friend Ryan could make sure your air conditioning is running at peak efficiency. He could even install a new one, built to a higher standard, American standard. Find out more at PCAirrepair.com.
Have you received a speeding ticket for which you want no points placed onto your driving record? I'm El Saulene, 850-215-0628. Let me help you.
All right, here it is. Let's watch this first.
A federal jury will not hear the majority of evidence the FBI and federal prosecutors spent the last 3 years collecting in the Lynn Haven corruption case.
No, they won't.
Did you hear that? Now, how does that, God, the way they present that, right? The jury won't hear the majority of the evidence collected. And now Huey Lewis in the news here, Tom Lewis, he's going to tell you about the massive conspiracy against James Finch that James Finch is being accused of. No, he's not. They've dropped it. They've dropped the massive conspiracy, Tom, and you know it. the jury's going to consider whether the $5,000 check that James Finch wrote before Hurricane Michael was a bribe. That's the entire thing. And by the way, the reason that it's, in my opinion, the reason that it is only that is because that prevents the public trust unit investigators from likely having to get on the stand and explain why they did what they did. Because if ECS was still in it, you know, the cleaning up the property, the motorhome and all that, which was untrue. If that was still part of it, then the defense would be able to question the investigators about it. That's why, in my opinion, that's why they're dropped, and that's why it'll never go to trial. The motorhome, incidentally, is coming back home because they found out that it was not given by James Finch to Margo Anderson as a bribe. And as a matter of fact, it was paid for. Well, hell, what do you know? By Anderson's husband. But do you remember the big, imagine this being said about you and it wasn't true. Do you remember this 2.5 years ago?
It also indicates that things of value were given to Ms. Anderson, including a motorhome valued at $106,000 that was provided by the owner of Company B, who bought it from a third person, or paid for it, not bought it, purchased it from a third person, and it was titled in the name of Ms. Anderson's husband at no cost.
A complete lie. A complete lie. And then we heard of that Finch was Mayor Anderson had, as if she could, she had somehow diverted the hurricane clean. I couldn't believe that. When I saw that, I was there in that room, and I couldn't believe that Mayor Anderson diverted all of that to her lifelong friend, costing the city $2 million. I couldn't believe it. It turns out that wasn't true either. Here's what they said about that.
Other portion that the indictment indicates is following a meeting of the mayor, Mayor Anderson, with the executive owner of Company B and also Company A and the city manager and a few other individuals, it was decided that Company B would get more business. And in this particular case, vegetative debris, the hauling companies, the main hauling companies referred to as companies C and D in the indictment, were directed by Lynn Haven to dispose of the vegetative debris at Company B lot in a pit that they had there. This also, one was started on about November 1st, the other was approximately November 11th. This cost Lynn Haven approximately $2 million in fees that had to pay to Company B. And the indictment notes, importantly, that prior to this occurring, the city manager had attempted to permit a site owned by Lynn Haven, which would have cost nothing for the citizens to have the haulers dump this vegetative debris at that location. The indictment.
All a complete lie and dropped. And, had that gone to trial, well, actually, you can see now because the FBI memos, you can see who actually did that. That all that truth's coming out. All right, let's get back to Huey Lewis in the news, though, and how he describes this. Right? Let's start this over. Remember, the reason the jury's not going to hear most of the evidence is because the prosecutors dropped most of the charges. WMBB. This is what the people are hearing from their news station. Remember, this news station is partners with Neves Media, which forever, not recently though, forever had been the campaign media company for the establishment's candidates. They're partners in this. The FBI knows that. But listen to that. Knowing what you know now, listen to how WMBB frames this. Remember, most of the evidence the jury is not going to hear because the prosecutors dropped those charges.
Judge Mark Walker has.
Here, I'm trying to rewind it.
This is News 13 at 6.
A federal jury will not hear the majority of evidence the FBI and federal prosecutors spent the last 3 years collecting in the Lynn Haven corruption case.
No, they won't. Judge Mark Walker has filed an order restricting testimony and lawyers' remarks during Phoenix construction under James Finch's trial next month. Finch is the case's sole remaining defendant. He was accused of a widespread conspiracy and bribery involving Lynn Haven city government contracts. But after a plea deal with another one of the defendants, most of those charges were dismissed. Federal prosecutors are now only accusing Finch of conspiracy and bribery with $45,000 in payments to then sitting Commissioner Antonius Barnes.
The charge is actually a single $5,000 check, as you'll find out as this progresses.
Finch and Barnes deny it was a bribe. They're calling it a business loan. Barnes has pled guilty to a lesser charge in connection to the case. 8 people have pled guilty to charges involving the corruption case, including Lynn Haven's former mayor, city manager, and the former city attorney.
Remember, so dishonest, so misleading. Remember, Mayor Anderson did not plead guilty to any of the 64 charges, and she is not cooperating with the prosecutors because they didn't want to take her to trial. And they said, look, we've got all of these witnesses who are awaiting their sentencing, who are going to say that you met Mickey White in October, even though you told us it was more like December. So then, therefore, you lied to the FBI. That's what she had to plead guilty to. But listening to this, it makes it sound like she pled guilty to these charges, didn't it?
Attorney. But Judge Mark Walker has ruled the jury will not hear testimony involving any of those cases. You can read that in full order, the entire order, on mypanhandle.com.
All right. So I just wanted to refresh your memory a little bit about the promises that were made to clean up corruption by Sheriff Tommy Ford. I mean, it was a big press conference. You know, they really got our hopes up. One of the things that upsets me the most is false hope. And I tell the story. If you've heard me tell the story, forgive me, but I just want to share it one more time. And that's of Pandora's box. Do you know the story of Pandora's box, where she was given a gift? It was this beautiful box, very ornate. And she was told that the only thing she couldn't do was look inside of it, right? And her curiosity got the best of her. And after about a week, she started thinking, maybe they really want me to look in the box. So she did. And when she looked in the box, these little evils flew out of the box. Pain, death, poverty, sickness. They all flew out like little lizards, like little, flying bugs. And so she slammed it closed. And when she slammed it closed, Pandora, there was only one evil left in the box. And it's the only evil that if it had gotten out, humans cannot survive. You know what it is? Foreboding. Hopelessness. That's what it is. The only thing that keeps people going is hope. And so especially politician who sells false hope, it particularly upsets me. And I'm telling you, we were sold false hope. It's very clear we were sold false hope. And a lot of people in the community are grateful for it because they got away with it. But a question being asked, not by the FBI or Sheriff Tommy Ford, is that if Lynn Haven was robbed of $5 million, and they were at least, where did the $5 million go? Mickey White got it. ECS. Michael White arranged it, as did others. So that's $5 million. Where did it go? It's like the Epstein client list. Where did it go? They know where it went, but nobody's indicted over it. Instead, we're talking about a $5,000 check that James Finch wrote. That's what we're talking about. Federal case. 3 years, God knows how many millions of dollars. I really want to know how much the sheriff's office has spent on this to come up with these results, a fruitful partnership. It just, forgive me, I know you're mad at me. It just doesn't look like that it's that damn fruitful. Kind of seems like people are still getting ripped off, and it kind of seems like the people that pocketed the money are sashaying around town with a wink and a nudge and a smile. You know what I mean? So that's where we are right now. But the bad thing for the people who stole it is that the evidence is public. It's out there now. There are civil lawsuits. Like the truth's going to come out. WMBB will, they'll cover for the hell. Did they get any of it? Do you think WMBB got any through Neves Media or through the U.S. Attorney's Office or through the Sheriff's Office or through any private or any government or quasi-government agency? Do they receive any kind of advertising money? Or I know the federal government gives news outlets money to encourage certain stories and discourage other stories. Wouldn't that be interesting to find out? Hopelessness. The one thing people can't survive with hopelessness. Selling false hope is that's a real gut shot. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
So at the last hearing about a week and a half ago, I got a chance to talk to the U.S. Attorney, Jason Cootie. I caught him in the hallway, and I like Jason Cootie. I've heard good things about Jason Cootie. And I know that the buck stops with him on this case. And I told him I'm not real happy about this. But I met you about 3 years ago, and you were very nice to me. And y'all kind of liked what we were doing here, And how do the people get you information so that we can get the real bad guys? Got to have hope, right? So, U.S. Attorney Cootie, we've still got hope, and you're the one who can take a close look. If you're not getting all the information from Coons, or I'll do my best to help you, because there's a lot of it there. Will you please help us have honest government and restore public trust? You're the one who can do it. And we need it. We really need it. All right, with that, I want to thank the Unknown Patriot as well. And the reason that we have an Unknown Patriot is because my sponsors get attacked. Literally attacked. Stories I've never told you. So sometimes people say, Bernie, I want to support you. And that's one way you can do it. You can be an Unknown Patriot and support the show. And they can guess who it is, and they can tell the FBI who they think it is. I'll help you with that investigation too. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being with me, and I will see you soon.